Fearless family, welcome back to another episode. I'm super pumped to have you here with me, listening, watching, whatever you are doing. I'm super grateful to have you on board. If you are listening on any platform, I would appreciate it so much if you would share it across your social media, share it with a friend, do whatever you have to do to help continue to grow this podcast because I'm extremely passionate about it. I feel like I've got so many more stories to tell and so many situations to uncover and show you guys how I got through those. So I appreciate all your support, all your messages coming through as well. They mean the absolute world. So thank you very much. But let's get stuck into today's episode. So last episode, I briefly spoke on me when I was going through the PT and growing the business, how that affected my football. And I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that in today's episode to give you a real insight into it taking off and then my football being on the back burner. So I started off the year really well. So this year is 2020. All right. So I felt really, really strong, really conditioned. I was in probably the best shape that I had ever been in at that stage up until that point in life. I'm definitely in better shape now, but at that point I was in probably the best shape that I'd been in. I was physically sitting between 82 to 84 kilos. I'm still sitting there between now, but have a little bit more muscle mass. So out in the footy field, I could notice very early on that I could start to withstand some of the bumps, the hits, body positioning as a defender. I felt like I could hold my own ground and that sort of thing. So that was a real big positive. So I was really happy with how the work that I did during COVID and that little break that we did have in Adelaide, about probably 8 weeks or so. The break that we did have, the work that I put in really set me up for a really good start to the season. And I remember running out onto Adelaide Oval round 1 because we got to play on Adelaide Oval. And I was just like, I'm ready for this. Like, I've put in so much work. I am ready to go out and play some good footy. And I was playing off the halfback flank. We played our first 2 games at Adelaide Oval and had relatively solid games. Was relatively happy. Always can continue to improve, but I was happy with the way that my season started. And then as the business grew, as my fatigue levels continued to grow throughout the season, that's when I needed to pull back in terms of the business side of things, because being on your legs and being a personal trainer, you have to motivate and inspire people very, very consistently. And I found it difficult to balance being able to play football, put my energy in towards that, and also have the PT business that I was extremely passionate about as well. So looking back now, I needed to pull back the amount of hours that I was doing, set boundaries within myself, because that is something that I've always struggled with. I always want to try and please others. And in terms of business and reputation, I want to try and give myself a good name. Everyone wants to do that. So I was responding to people at 10 o'clock at night after a massive 12 to 15 hour day plus football training. All of it was just way too much. So setting those boundaries, I think, is extremely important, and it's going to tie into the last little learning that I'm going to share with you guys at the end of this episode as well. But the business was doing extremely well. Like a typical day for me, I was up around 4:30 for a 5 o'clock start. I would coach from about 5 till to about lunchtime. I then have 1 or 2 hours to eat lunch, to train myself. Sometimes I was sacrificing training myself just to coach an extra hour of PT, which looking back was the wrong thing to do. Like, I need to prioritize me, my football career, and my health at the same time as well. So that was something I needed to balance. And then from about 2 o'clock to 5:15, 5:30, I was then coaching, or I was working at Adidas, my other part-time job at the time as well. And then from there, I'd go straight to football training. I would train for 2.5 hours, and then I would come back and I would run straight into another PT session to finish off the night. So I was going from literally 4:30 a.m. to about 8:30 at night. I would then have dinner. I would shower, program for the next day, go to sleep probably around 10 o'clock, 10:30 sometimes. And I'm up in 6 hours again. And being an athlete and only running off 6 hours of sleep plus 15, 16 hour days, which I enjoyed because I was doing something that I loved, I didn't realize it was slowly contributing to me performing worse on the football field. So I just lost sight of the game, and we had an app. I did speak about this in a previous podcast as well, but we had an app at the Glenelg Football Club, which was our wellness app, and it had to be done by a certain time. And I remember the coach, we'd lost a game a couple weeks prior, and there was a lot of boys not doing that app. And I hadn't missed one up until this point that I'm about to speak about. But he said after the game a couple weeks prior that if anyone misses the app, they're not playing the next week. They're not playing league or reserves. And so everyone started to contribute because obviously no one wanted to miss the game. And he was trying to drive those elite standards. And this one Thursday morning, I was just back to back and literally up until 12 o'clock. I then made lunch, sat down, checked my phone. I was like, oh shit, like I got to do this app because it meant to be done by 12 o'clock. I did it at 1 o'clock and had the coach call me, and we spoke about it a little bit. What was the reason, all that sort of stuff. And then I got called into a meeting when I went to football training that night and told that I wasn't going to be playing because I missed this app. And I was devastated because I felt like I let myself down, I let my parents down, I let my teammates down. And it was all because I was running this business that was really successful, but I lost sight of the one thing that I was chasing, which was making the AFL. And if I'm not playing league football, there's no chance of me making the AFL. Then the next week coming back from that, I had one of the worst games that I've ever played, which again, I spoke about in my last podcast as well. And then from there I got dropped, which was absolutely reasonable because I played horribly. I'd come off of not doing the right thing and I got dropped, played a few reserves games, ended up finishing the year off really, really strong and got back into the side. But that was only due to my mum and dad helping me set boundaries and saying, hey, you're finishing at Friday at 12 o'clock and you're only doing 5 hours on a Friday because you've got a game to prepare for the next day. You're not coaching anyone over the weekend because you need that time to recover, that time to sleep, that time to prepare for the game. And during the week, you're cutting back your hours to a maximum of 20 hours a week. Plus you had your Adidas stuff as well, which was at least 12 hours a week as well. So it's still nearly a full time, like a 40-hour week. But it was just reducing from literally nearly in half, which I struggled with. And I struggled knocking back people because, as I said earlier, all I wanted to do was please other people to give myself a good reputation starting out a business. That's all you want to do. And when the only person working in that business is you've got a lot of responsibility and expectation to provide for these people. So that was hard to deal with at the time, but it needed to happen for me to continue to grow as an athlete, as a footballer, and as a human being at the same time. And learning how to set boundaries and those sorts of things is super important. Played in the final against South Adelaide, played quite well, played through the midfield and played in the positions that I wanted to play in. And I remember the coach coming up to me after the game and he said, wow, looks like we've found a midfielder. And at the time I felt like saying, well, I've been here all year. Like I wanted to play midfield all year, but it didn't happen until that last game. But it just goes back to earning your spot, earning that respect and reputation from your coach, putting in the hours. And it only come from me putting in extra hours towards my football. Like I would go out and do little craft sessions by myself and craft sessions with dad and those sorts of things. And that's what sets you up for a really good week, because some people might not believe in what's called the footy gods, but I'm a massive believer that if you're doing the right things off the field, on the field, your head's going to be clear. You're going to have things that just fall your way a little bit easier. But when you're not in that state and you're focused on so many different things, that's when things don't go your way and the ball bounces the other way, or it bounces a meter in front of you and goes out of bounds, or you get the ball kicked over your head. Simple things like that you might not realize, but you get frustrated with. That's the footy gods. Like they're impacting you because of the week that you've had and the work that you've been putting in prior to that. So I think that's super important to understand. And the biggest learning out of that is distractions are going to come. Distractions are going to come in different forms. For other people, it might be girls, it might be alcohol, it might be drugs, it might be work, it might be uni. For me, it was business, and I got distracted by that and it affected my football. And it might affect your football as well, whether you're 12, 13, 15. 18, 25 coming through, if you've got all these distractions around you and you don't have a clear focus of what you need to do each week to get to where you want to go, that's when your performance starts to drop. All right. And that's when you start to need to create boundaries for yourself and say, no, enough's enough. I'm not dealing with all these results that I don't want. I'm going to put in the work to make sure I get to where I want to go, because I had big goals. I had big dreams, big visions. I still do. Mine was to make the AFL and was to get drafted back into the AFL as quickly as possible since when I got delisted. But my attention, my energy, my focus wasn't in the right areas. It was in the business because I was so passionate about it, which is great. But you can't have it all. You can't have everything that you want. You can't have this really successful business and then also be playing at the elite level. Like, it just doesn't work like that. Your energy requirements, you're spreading yourself too thin. So if you're out there, you're coming through and there's a lot of distractions around you, what my suggestion is, you create boundaries around yourself. And as hard as it might be, you got to say no. You got to say, no, this is not in line with where I want to go and where I need to get to. So I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to say no, or you just got to change up your week slightly and be able to control that. Because if you can't control that, you're not going to be able to control the pressures that come when you're at the elite level. So that is my recommendations, my advice. Hopefully you guys got something out of that. And at the same time, stay fearless.